Major funding for these programs is made possible by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending, New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Genova Burns, Terra CRG, Meridian Capital Group, Wyckoff Organization. Additional support is made possible by AKA Hotels Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AmTrust Title, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Fisher Brothers, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investments, Hersha Hospitality, Hodges Ward Elliott, Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Newbanks, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, The Continuum Company, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Brooklyn, New York, Brownsville, Manhattan Beach, restaurants. I'm going to go on steamships. I'm going to learn the food business. Grandpa says, come on into the food business. But now I could go into the music business. Nah, I'm going to go in the food business. I'm not going to go in the food business. I'm going to get involved with a business that's been around since the late 1860s. A legend, the historic Old Homestead. You know what? We're going to grow the business even more. We're going to go out to Atlantic City. We're going to go to the Borgata. We're going to go to Caesars. So me and my brother have this little business called the Old Homestead. It's not a business. It's a legend. And the story of the Sherrys are a legend. I'm here with Greg Sherry. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yes, I was very confused at 17 and 18. Couldn't figure out what I wanted to do.
We'll get to that in a minute. So now let's talk about the Sherry side, which you said to me was not the Sherry. The name originally was what?
Shanowski.
And where did the Shanowskis come from?
Shanowski came from Poland, and my grandfather realized Shanowski wasn't going to fly, and Dad wanted to go into the music business, so he changed the name to Sherry, shortened it.
Grandpa Harry,
Harry Red.
Harry Red, the patriot of the family, was born in 1916, but he was born here.
Yes, he was born here.
He was born here, and his parents came over.
That's correct.
And what did they do originally? Any idea?
In Poland?
No, when they came here to America.
When they came here to America, they were the immigrants looking for work. Grandpa decided he didn't want to work. He wanted to do things that could make him a lot of money without having to work.
We'll get to that in a second. So let's talk about Grandma's side.
Grandma's side came over from Eastern Europe and became a baker here and just baked all his life. And on Sundays, we'd always go over there and he'd have boxes of cookies for us. He was a very quiet man, a very sturdy man, and he was not a man that talked much, but had a great smile on his face.
So how did Grandpa Red, who, as we would say, he was a Brownsville boy.
Oh, yes.
And he was an operator at that time. We could call him a character.
He ran a speakeasy is what he ran.
Right, he ran a speakeasy.
Correct.
He was also a little bootlegger.
He did a lot of bootlegging. He liked to hang out with the rough and tumble. He also had some fighters that he managed. Those days in Brownsville, it was a different world. Very dear friends with a fellow named Julius Podell, who owned the Copacabana. Best friends with a gentleman named Al Newman, who was the elite bail bondsman in New York City of those days. So you can get an idea of the crowd that Grandpa ran with.
Now, you said to me, Grandpa, he had a number of brothers, Grandpa.
Yes.
And one was Stitch.
Stitch, who blew up the...
So what happened with Stitch?
Stitch was a heavy smoker. Grandpa had a distillery in Brooklyn with a few people, and he used to always say, Stitch, please don't light a cigarette when you walk in. It's highly flammable, please. And Grandpa was with a bunch of the boys, and they heard an explosion. And they didn't have to turn out one bit. They knew Stitch blew up the brewery. Block was on fire. Stitch ran out of town. Nobody knew who owned the brewery, and they continued to go on about their business.
And Stitch came back later on?
Stitch came back 6 months later.
And he worked for Grandpa?
Yeah, he worked on the boats bringing the bootlegging in. Until the day he brought the boat in and a fog hit. And he stopped the boat, figuring to let the fog go in. And in the morning, we'd go back to the pier. Unfortunately, when the fog finally came away, it was 2 Coast Guard boats next to them. That was the end of Stitch. Stitch no longer was in the business.
So Stitch left the business. Now,
yes.
But you mentioned to me that Grandpa had a bulletproof car?
Yeah, Grandpa had a bullet. Grandpa was a Damon Runyon character.
He loved dressing. We have the picture of Grandpa with
an immaculate dresser. You
right.
never would catch him without a suit and tie. He had a bulletproof car because in those days, that's how they, it was a rough and tumble time. It was the Meyer Lansky, the Bug Siegel, the Joe Adonis. It was that Murder Incorporated out of Brooklyn. And that was the way they rolled. It was the norm of those days.
What everybody reads when you read about the history of the Old Homestead, it says that Grandpa was like a bartender or a busboy. But in 1944, when Grandpa bought the restaurant, he's 28 years of age. And he basically bought the restaurant. Why?
Because he wanted to have his friends come. He was very close with the politicians in New York. He was very dear friends with A. Beam. And he knew all the mayors, and he liked them to come and be part of his restaurant.
So, now, but he knew nothing about the restaurant.
He wouldn't even know where the kitchen was. If there was something to be done, when I got into business, if a light bulb was out, he said, Greg, the light bulb's out.
Well, it's cute to talk about Grandpa in this way, that he's 28 years of age. He buys a steakhouse with some of his buddies, right?
Yes, with some of his friends.
And he buys the legendary Old Homestead, which is founded in, what, 1868?
1868 from a gentleman and 2 gentlemen, Hines and Timmons. I'm not sure it was as legendary in those days as it is now, but it was a place to hang out. You know, those days, that area was very well known until it turned, because of the meat packing made it a little bit undesirable for a
Right,
while.
because at that time, I remember many years ago when I did some consulting for a bank, I mean, walking into the area or the homestead at night, it was not the safest location. I mean, people would go to the neighborhood to go to the Old Homestead, but that wasn't it.
It was a destination. And I'll never forget the first day I started, my grandfather still be working till 12 o'clock closing up. I said, okay, whatever I got to do. He says, see the 2 gentlemen sing at the bar. Those are the 2 gentlemen that close with you. I said, well, I don't need anybody to close with me. You know, I'll handle it. I said, those are the 2 gentlemen that will close with you. It's not safe to be alone.
So now let's go to the next generation. Let's talk about the king of the bar mitzvahs, your father, Herb. Tell me about that.
My father was in the Navy, and he was in the band in the Navy. And he came out of the Navy, and he had a band, and Grandpa
Right, he started playing music when he was like 7 years of age, right?
Yeah, he has what they call a natural ear. He could pick up a trumpet. He could play any instrument naturally. He also could read music because he was a musical conductor at Brown's Hotel as time went on. But Grandpa said to him, let's get you a band and we'll find the place in Brooklyn. I have a friend that owns a kosher caterer in Brooklyn, and we'll make you the house band. So he went to a place in Brooklyn called the Menorah Temple. Dad started there. From there it was 1 place, 2 places, 3 places. And he became the #1 band leader in weddings and bar mitzvahs in New York City.
But he performed with many, I think
with every person.
With everybody. I mean, there was Regis Philbin, but he also performed, I think, for the inaugural for
Harry Truman.
Harry
That's
Truman.
correct.
Tell me the story about that.
This is interesting. They had a gentleman to come up and sing the national anthem. When they announced the gentleman to come up, he was not to be found. Dad, just being with the band, started to play it, sang the song, and Harry Truman walked over to me afterwards and says, I have to thank you. You saved the day for me.
how did your dad get involved with the Browns, where you spent many, many enjoyable summers? So we have
That's
pictures.
correct. The Browns was looking for a band, and Grandpa made a call to Mrs. Brown, who he knew very, very well, and I want you to meet my son. And they became dear friends, and he was the orchestra leader for 35 years. He played for every person you could possibly
So when did
think
he
of.
start at the Browns?
Oh, he started in the Browns because probably 50, I would say no, 60 years ago, 65 years ago. And as you know, in those days, every comic started in the Catskill Mountains. Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin, that was their home. And Dad was known as, when you get to Browns, see Herb, give him the music, and everything is taken care of.
There was a New York Times article that I found, another article. Your dad was called the king of the bar mitzvahs.
That's correct, because Brooklyn was a predominantly Jewish area, and he specialized in bar mitzvahs. So he did more bar mitzvahs than anybody in the history of music. So they called him the king of the bar mitzvah.
Dad had no interest to get into the restaurant business?
No interest. Dad was the gentleman that could not sit and have a conversation with you until he got on the stage. Most people would say, your dad never would say hello to me. I said, yeah, but watch him on the stage. The minute he got on the stage, he was a different person, which was an unbelievable.
Now, how about Grandpa? Was he...
Grandpa was the best networker in New York City. People loved to sit and chat with him. He was Mr. Connection. If you needed to meet somebody, Grandpa was the guy. If you wanted to see a show, Grandpa was the guy that knew Schubert's and everybody. If you needed to have a meeting with somebody in New York at the Homestead, Grandpa was the man.
And Grandpa also employed Uncle Al.
Uncle Al was in charge of the books. Let's end it right there.
So let's talk about the next generation. You were born where? In Brownsville?
No, I was born on Caton Avenue in Brooklyn. Then we moved to Ocean Avenue and Avenue X. And as time went on, we went into Manhattan Beach. Then I got married. I moved to Ocean Parkway.
Well, let's get to the beginning.
Okay.
So, when you were a kid, you growing up as a youth, at the age of 6, were you on Ocean Parkway?
I was on Ocean Avenue.
Ocean Avenue.
And Avenue X. 2865. Okay.
And then where did you
Then
go
we
to public
moved
school?
from there, public school 195. Then from there we went into Manhattan Beach. Spent most of my life in Manhattan Beach till I got married.
So you went to Manhattan Beach,
Went to Abraham Lincoln High School.
right? Graduated
I don't know.
in '64.
Well, that's correct, on Ocean Parkway. Still love Brooklyn to this day.
You said to me when we got together that you were involved on cruise ships.
Okay, I was just going to, Grandpa had a friend that was the head of the union. And he said, my grandson would like to travel. Could he get a job on the ships? So I joined the union, and every summer,
So when did you start working on the cruise
I
ships?
started working in the cruises in 1964, only the summers. And my last cruise was to Guayaquil, Ecuador, where I was working on a banana boat, and a revolution broke out, and simultaneously there was a shipping strike in New York, so the boat had to go away from the dock, and we couldn't go to New York. We laid there for 63 days. That's how long the strike was. Finally, I got permission to fly back.
Now, so when you graduated Lincoln, what? I mean, you had an opportunity.
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to work for McDonald's. My wife said at that time, I should say, my future wife said, do you intend to get a job someday? You always seem to be running someplace. You're on a boat going somewhere. I said,
Now you met your wife.
my wife Penny. She was in Tilden High School in Brooklyn. So I got to work on the ships, and I came back and I went to work for McDonald's. And I did the program, and they said to me, you've done very well. Would you be interested in buying a franchise for $125,000? I went to my father. I said, Dad, listen, I have an opportunity. I'd like to get married. Could you loan me $125,000? I'm going to open up a McDonald's hamburger stand. His remark to me was, what the hell are you going to do with hamburgers? Take a walk. Go to work in the city. That ended my career at McDonald's.
So since that ended your career, what happened next?
Grandpa says, come into the restaurant, work in the check room. I need someone to hang up coats. I did that. And from there, I decided, you know what, it's a pretty wild business. I don't have a future, but I can make a living. I'll get
Now,
married.
So when did you get married?
I got married in 1972. I got married, and I started to say, I have to learn every position to be successful. I wanted to be on the job, and I wanted a degree in food, and I wanted to learn about
Right,
food.
because New York City community
Has a very good program,
Right,
an excellent
food program.
and a lot of
some of the better chefs like
come out
Michael
of
Monaco and other
Michael,
people.
Stan Zimmerman from
Right.
Sammy's Romanian
Right.
was one of my.
And Bruce Bozzi.
Bruce Bozzi was with us, yes. So I decided if I'm going to learn the business, I need to learn every aspect of the business. And that's what I did for the first 4 or 5 years. And then from there,
What was Dad's opinion of you being in the restaurant?
he was happy that I found a place. He wanted me off the streets. You know, growing up in Brooklyn, you know, it was a tough neighborhood. And he'd rather see me working than hanging in the streets. And then the problem occurred when my grandfather and I came to realization is, where do I go from here? And his other partners bought a couple more restaurants, and I realized they were not watching what was going on. And I brought it to the attention of my grandfather. I said, Pop, listen, I'm an honest guy. I don't think you're getting a fair shake. He says, I don't really care. As long as I get my envelope sent to me in Florida, I'm happy. Until the envelope stopped. And to make it short, I said to them, you guys can buy us out or we'll buy you out of the restaurants. And we made a deal, and I remained with the Old Homestead. Very unsuccessful at that point, the Old Homestead.
Where were the other restaurants?
Was the Assembly, Shines, and Manny Wolf's. Old Homestead was weak. They bought us out for a fairly, I should say, I bought them out for a fairly inexpensive price. And
Now,
I
was
went
your
to
brother
work.
involved? In
Not
the
then.
business at the-
He came in 5 years later. But when you say work, we were there 24/7 to keep the payroll down. We closed, we opened, we did the butchering, we did the receiving. I used to go into the market in the morning to buy the meat. And that's how we survived the recession.
There's a story about the cow.
Yes.
Talk to
My
me
grandfather's sitting in his usual spot, which he owned. The gentleman walked in and said, hey, Harry, how you doing? He says, listen, I got a cow. I want to send it to New York, put it on the roof. So my grandfather said, sure, John, just have a good time, send the cow. About 2 weeks later, the cow shows up.
A live cow.
No, a big,
Okay.
big plastic cow. And it sat on the side with the king of beef. So my grandfather, being a stand-up guy, could not disrespect this gentleman, just took the cow and put it on the roof. And it's been there ever since.
But you've taken it away.
We've taken it away. We brought it to the opening of Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. Julian Schnabel did a magnificent picture of a cow for the Borgata for our opening, which hangs in our restaurant. So it's become our branding name, Old Homestead and Cow.
Grandpa took it over in 44.
Mm-hmm.
You and your brother and your grandpa bought the restaurant when from the partners?
64, 20 years later.
So it's 1964. You're 18 years of age at this
Correct.
time. And basically, you know, it was a good restaurant, but it wasn't the same Old Homestead.
It was a restaurant in the meatpacking district. And anybody coming there would be coming there as a destination point. Then Mark joined me, and two were stronger than one in this business. And we built it, and we built it, and we worked it, and we built it, we tweaked it, and we tweaked it, and we
Now,
did
when you built
improvements.
it, you built it in certain different ways. The Wagyu beef and something
We
else.
brought in, we were the first gentlemen to bring in Wagyu beef, which is Kobe, is a region in Japan, and the Wagyu beef. And we were an instant success. People laughed at us for $125 steak, but we had a waiting list every single day. That was one of the things that took us from just a restaurant to a more exclusive steakhouse. And from there, we took the brand, we fixed the place up, we tweaked the menu, and we started to really go at that point. Our stock market was booming, and we hit a home run. And then 13 years ago, in July,
Which would be 2003.
2003, a gentleman by the name of Bob Bogner.
Right, but we were just coming after the 9/11, so it was still a slow time. New York was under a little
A
recession.
big, not a little. We were looking at each other with no one in the restaurant for a couple of weeks. But that's what we do, Mark and I. took our steps. We cut here, cut there, and we gutted it out.
So what?
And then it turned.
So tell me about Bob Bogner.
Bob Bogner was the CEO of Boyd Gaming, who was opening up a casino called the Borgata. And he called me over to his table. He said, you know what? I want the brand. I said, I don't even know where Atlantic City is, and I don't know anything about the casino.
You lived in Jersey, but you never...
Never knew about Atlantic City. You know, at that time, only Resorts was opened. He says, would you like to do a restaurant for me? I said, thank you very much. No, it's something that I just don't know about, and I know steak. I don't know about casino business. 2 weeks later, Bob is there again. He says, my limo will be here to pick you up. I want you to at least see the project. And we stayed there. And
now, this is before Borgata is open?
We were in construction. Borgata was in construction. He says, I want you to see it. And we spent 5 hours with Bob Bogdan. And I turned to Bob. I said, Bob, you know what? I don't know anything about this business. I know about the steak, and I know I can give you the greatest steak in the world out there. I said, but I believe in you as an individual, Bob. I said, I'll do the deal. Teach me. What is the deal? He says, I'm going to give you the deal. I said, if that's the deal, I take the deal. We're 13 years there. We're the most successful restaurant at Borgata, the most profitable restaurant.
How big is the restaurant out there?
200 seats. Okay. Every Saturday night we're sold out. Every celebrity that performs at Borgata eats with us. And about 4 years ago, Caesar's Palace approached us and says, we heard what you did at Borgata. Why can't you take Nero's that's doing 7 and turn it into 14 for us? I said, make me the deal. And 4 years ago, and to this exact word, 7 became 13 and a half.
So now, as you said, it's good that there are two brothers in the business.
Correct.
Because one handles Atlantic City and
That's
one
correct.
handles Vegas.
That's correct. Well, the way we had to operate is my brother and I, as we aged, we took the management team, and each individual manager in each restaurant became pretty much our partner. Full responsibility of operations. We really became the promoters of the restaurant, the promoters of menu
Right, more
changes.
of the face. Face
And
of the
face and of the
organization.
brand.
Of the brand.
Correct. And our managers in Borgata have been there from day one. Our manager in New York's been with us for 20 years. Our manager in Caesars is there for 4 years. We allow these guys to operate the restaurant for us.
But you and your brother are physically on hand.
Absolutely. Mark is in Borgata almost every single Saturday night. I'm in Vegas 7 times a year. I'm in New York usually Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So there's always a face to be seen. Like I'm doing your show, we do promotional events. And it's a good thing to give people responsibilities, because when somebody's working for you, they're always a workman. But if you make them feel part of a family or part of an organization, they appreciate what you did for them, and you get a lot more out of them.
So what about the idea of expanding the brand even more?
We only are interested in expanding the brands where we feel the brand will not be diminished
Proselytized.
or proselytized. We seem to have a forte in casinos. We seem to do very well in casinos. So we don't rush to make any deals. Listen, we're there. I'm there 50 years. We only did 3 deals. So we're very slow, methodical. And this way, the people that we approach know that we're going to be successful. If we make a deal with somebody, they know they're going to be successful, because if we take that opportunity, we know we can make them a lot of money.
And Dad never went in.
They just like to come and eat. That's all he did.
As
Like
many
to come and
people.
eat.
So let's talk about your family. Tell me a little bit about your wife. How you
My
met.
wife and I, we met in Brooklyn at a...
Because she was Tilden. You have to remember.
That's
you
correct.
were Lincoln,
And I was Lincoln.
It was a difference.
It was bad.
Neighborhood.
It was bad.
Right.
Couldn't date a girl in Tilden. But I was at my fraternity house.
If it was in Queens, you would have never met her.
No, never.
Geographically undesirable.
Undesirable. We met one day. I went into the Air Force right after I met her, to the reserves. And I came back, and we started to date. It's 46 years later. We're best friends, partners.
Now, where were you in the Air Force Reserve?
I was in Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. The
You were
hell.
a pilot?
I never saw an airplane. I was a musician in the band there, marching band.
So, did you ever play?
I had a little enough knowledge to get me through that. I didn't have to go on an airplane. I joined the band. It was 3 months of hell because it was 105 degrees every day. Then we came back, and I went up to Newburgh Air Force Base.
So you went once a month up to.
I didn't know 6 months up there. And then I came back to do the reserves once a month, which I didn't mind. I kind of.
So you got married 46 years.
I got married. I have 2 daughters. I have
Tell me about your 2 daughters.
Okay, I have one daughter, Marissa, who is a master's in nutrition, but she specialized in anorexia and bulimia. Very,
And
very.
she's married to who?
She's married to Anil Katz, who is part of the Weather Channel. He's head of the digital media division, which just got purchased by IBM. They got the most darling little girl, Ivy, my best friend. My other daughter was with Raptor, a gentleman named Jim Pilata, who was bought the Roma soccer team, and she ran his New York office. And now she's just retired to high-end travel, and she's living in Livingston with my grandson, Axel. And my daughter is pregnant again, will give birth in September.
So do you think the next generation?
No.
What about your brothers?
No. My brother's son is very, very successful on Wall Street. His daughter lives in Florida, and his other daughter is in New Jersey, just got married 2 weeks ago. But we don't want the family in the business, because we've seen when you bring in family members, they have a tendency sometimes to do the wrong thing and can ruin a very good thing. Mark and I can dance every step together. He knows if I'm going right, I know if he's going left. And if we make a
And
mistake...
Mark never wanted to get involved with the music business either?
No, he didn't. And Mark has more musical talent than I do. He can sing. He used to play the accordion a little bit. But you know what? The partnership works. He's got his abilities. I have my abilities. We make money together, and that's what's important.
And you know what? The history of Harry and Herb, is an interesting history. And now we've set it straight on the story about
He's
Harry.
not a busboy.
Okay, wasn't a busboy.
And he wasn't a bartender.
And he built up a nice business, but it was really because he had his grandsons to go into the business.
And you know what? We were signatures that Greg and Mark will always be in the 4 food groups for the rest of their lives. Beef, 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 and beef. That's the only business they'll ever be in.
And thanks for being here today.
It was my pleasure.